Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Jacie Gregory is an animal-based health coach, recipe developer, and bikini competitor. After trying and failing at other mainstream diets, she started the carnivore way of eating in January of 2020 and hasn't looked back. The mental and physical health benefits she gained from an animal-based diet allowed her to finally take the leap of pursuing an extraordinary dream of hers when she stepped on stage for a bikini competition in the summer of 2021. Her passion for sharing her carnivore journey comes from the positive impact that eating an animal-based diet has had on her health and on her life. You can find her on Instagram at ladycarnivory and on Facebook by joining the private group called The Meat Fam. Jacie, what an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I love the name Meat Fam. How did you come up with that?
I went through my stories the other day and actually found that originally I was saying Meat Family, but it's just my response to the amazing carnivore community on Instagram. They've really kept me going and encouraged and supported me, and they really feel like my family. So started calling them my Meat Family, which eventually got shortened to Meat Fam.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. And I couldn't agree more. Like the more and more I'm in this community, now being almost 3 years, it's like there's so many kind and wonderful people. I see so little fighting or bickering or arguing over what carnivore has to be or doesn't have to be. It's just people that want to support you and answer questions and cheer you on for stuff. It's really quite an amazing community.
It really is. I think the one thing we all have in common is we're willing to do radical things to live extraordinary lives. And so it's an amazing group of people to be a part of because everyone is just so motivated to find whatever, aspect of carnivore they're looking for, whether it be weight loss or health gains or whatever.
Yeah, I love that. So I only really use Instagram for the business. I'll post little sound bites of podcasts and things like that. I'll promote the podcast on Instagram. But other than that, I'm horrible at Instagram. You are amazing at Instagram, and your food pictures that you post are unreal. They look so good.
Well, thank you so much. It originally for me, it was really just an accountability thing and a way to connect with the community. And it's kind of grown to something much bigger than me. And it's been amazing to see it grow and now have the Facebook group, the Meat Fam, which is amazing. We get to connect and just have a shared experience. And I think that's really cool, especially in these times.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things you have on your Instagram is a little thing that I don't even know what it's called. It's so embarrassing. Maybe it's a reel. Is it a reel? The thing you click and it shows your story and it's like slide after slide after slide, and you have it set to different music and you're telling your story, which is a remarkable story. It's really cool that you're able to do that on Instagram. I certainly don't know how to do that, but your story is incredible. Can we maybe start, with your childhood and what your upbringing was like?
Absolutely. It was very, standard American diet. Both of my parents, they divorced when I was really young, but whoever's house I was at, it was pretty similar food. It was typically a meat, vegetable, and some sort of starch. I wouldn't say that I really had any issues with food until I got a little older. The situation at my mom's house was such that we at times had food insecurity. We wouldn't know when we would have food. And so when we did have food, it was such an occasion that we would typically get junk food because it was such a treat. And then at my dad's house, it was very much, my stepmom is English. So I grew up eating very English meals, which means a lot of potatoes. And eventually, getting into high school, there was just a lot of pressure to look or I guess feel a certain way. And I felt like if I looked a certain way, I would feel that way. And I started developing eating disorders around the same time I was diagnosed with OCD. And so there was just a lot of factors there kind of piling on each other. And then in addition to that, I loved animals my entire childhood. And everyone always told me oh, why aren't you vegetarian? You should be vegetarian. And so it just seemed like a natural progression for me to become a vegetarian. So I had OCD, eating disorders. I'm not saying that vegetarianism is an eating disorder, but it was definitely something I used in my own eating disorder because it was so restricted. If someone offered me food, I could say, no, thank you. I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat that. So I was actually using it as a lever in my eating disorders.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you a little bit about the animals. Were there any in particular that you were particularly fond of?
Oh my goodness. I grew up with such a menagerie. I had goats, and at one point, like a horse wandered into our yard, and we had a horse and
What?
dogs. I've always, yeah, we lived on a plant nursery. And so we lived right next to a state park, and people would ride their horses at the state park. And apparently one got loose, which I don't even know how that happened, but he like wandered onto our property. So we basically adopted this horse for a while until the owners came and got it. But we always had like dogs and chickens, and even, having goats for 4-H was an interesting experience for me because it is kind of that dichotomy of really caring for an animal, but then also understanding that that animal has a purpose beyond existence. Like it was used for meat or for milk, or in the case of some of my goats, they were actually cashmere goats. So we would use their hair and sell it for wool.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting experience. And my family were always like really big hunters. So we would come home and there would be like a javelina, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a type of wild peccary in Tucson, Arizona. And it would just be like draining in our front yard. So it was very weird for me to kind of try and reconcile that in my head, how I grew up with these animals like used for a purpose, whether it be hunting or farming, and then loving animals and being told that I should be a vegetarian because of that.
Mm. That is a really difficult thing to reconcile, especially in the beginning when you decide, well, if you really love animals and you're around animals all the time, it can be very, very difficult. And I would say for some people, borderline traumatic to decide that they are going to eat them or decide how they're going to make sense of any of that. That's difficult to reconcile.
Absolutely. I remember when I decided, when I finally started working through my eating disorders and decided I no longer wanted to be a vegetarian for health reasons. Um, the hardest part for me was actually the thought of eating flesh. I recognized that animal protein was probably what my body needed most at the time. But for me, it was the biggest stopping point for me was actually like biting into flesh again. And that was such a weird thing for me to have to overcome. And it's weird looking back now, the way I eat now, and remembering how I felt knowing that I was going to have to like eat an animal again. That was such a crazy time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we had Leah Keith on the show. She was a former vegan for like 20 years, and she couldn't even bring herself to like try to remove the snails that were eating the lettuce that she was trying to grow in her garden. The really crazy level of like, I love animals so much, I will go to any length so they don't get harmed. And it just doesn't really work like that. You talk a little bit about your toxic relationship in high school. I understand you moved sometime after that. Did that help you kind of reset things a little bit?
Absolutely. I think, anytime you're in a bad situation, anything you can do to remove yourself from that situation, whether it be physically or emotionally or mentally. So for that toxic relationship, I just drew better boundaries for myself. A lot of it was just maturing and knowing that the relationship wasn't serving me positively in any way. And drawing that boundary and breaking off that relationship definitely helped my mental state. And it kind of all happened at the same time where I left that relationship, started recovering from my eating disorders, and stopped being a vegetarian.
Wow. How was the recovery process for the eating disorder? Because that's not necessarily something that too many people like really fully recover from.
I tell my clients that you don't over you never get past an eating disorder. You live with it for the rest of your life. Like I still remember how it felt when I was in my eating disorder, and I still like sometimes I'll have disordered thoughts around food. The difference is I don't act on those thoughts anymore, and I can recognize those thoughts as disordered thoughts and choose to respond differently to them. But I don't think anyone truly ever just recovers from eating disorders in a way that they never think about it again. I
Mm.
definitely have way more food freedom now, the way that I eat now. Like food isn't a obsessive thought for me anymore. But I still have, lingering things that creep in. And it's a matter of how I respond to them, not necessarily that I don't have those thoughts anymore.
Gotcha. So I'm really curious, like, what did your diet look like after that? Because that would be very difficult, I would think, to try to figure out what you were going to eat after that.
Yeah, immediately after that, I returned to kind of standard American diet. And going beyond that, I started becoming interested in weightlifting. And at the time, If It Fits Your Macros was really big in the bodybuilding space. And so I tried that for a while. I tried calories in, calories out. I tried paleo. I tried low fat for quite a bit of time as well. So I was kind of all over the place and tried a bunch of different things. And I just never felt like anything was getting me to where I wanted to be in terms of my health and fitness goals.
So was your health still declining at this point?
Yes. So in addition to the OCD, I have chronic joint pain. I have scoliosis. And so everything hip down just kind of hurts a lot of the time. And I was always just really inflamed, I think was the general theme of all of my unwellness. I was also diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and I've never been a large person by any means. So that was really shocking to me when I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes, because I thought I was doing everything I could to be a healthy person. I was following, the mainstream media narrative of what it looked like to be a healthy person. I did a lot of cardio, and I was at the time paleo.
Wow. So when did you first hear about a kind of low carb, high fat ketogenic diet?
Well, I was actually pursuing low fat at the time, and I had a coworker who told me she was going to try this crazy high fat diet called keto. And I was like, girl, you are going to kill yourself. So being the giant nerd that I am, I went on PubMed and I started looking up articles about keto so I could prove to her how wrong she was. And turns out I was wrong. A lot of the articles I was finding were just saying how great keto was for reducing inflammation in the body. And I was very interested in that because I think anyone who's had chronic pain can kind of relate to this. Like, you will do anything you can to lessen that pain and just feel a little bit better. So that was really appealing to me. So I decided, after reading 10, 20 articles about how great keto was for inflammation, I decided I wanted to try it. And then I just binged all of the keto content available. And this was back in 2017. So there was quite a bit out at that time.
Sure. Who were your favorite people that you were following at the time?
I remember listening to a lot of Jimmy Moore's podcast, the Live and La Vida Low Carb Show. I started from the beginning, like way, way back when, so I could listen to those original interviews. That was huge for me. And then from there, I remember I was such a fangirl of Dominic D'Agostino. I still really am. I love I don't know if you follow him on Instagram, but he has a little farm and he posts his cows all the time, and he'll do 400-pound deadlifts just in the middle of a field. He's such a cool guy.
So cool. Yeah, it's funny. I was at Low Carb Denver on in March of 2020, like the weekend the world blew up, and you're seeing all these people that you hear about on podcasts, and you consume their content, like Brian Sanders, Dr. Cucuzella, Brian Lenskis, all these people, and you're just like, wow. It's weird to be starstruck by people in the health space. It's so funny. I'm curious to know, for somebody who is maybe, kind of on the border of that situation, they've heard about keto. What did your diet look like before, maybe when you were doing paleo, and how much of a difference was it to go from however you're eating before to a ketogenic diet back in 2017?
Yeah. So when I was eating paleo, I will say I ate quite a bit of fruit. I wasn't eating refined carbs at all. So no bread, no pasta, no rice, nothing like that. But I would eat sweet potatoes and I would eat quite a bit of fruit. And then typically leaner cuts of meat. I was a pretty lean paleo person. So I would eat leaner cuts of meat and lots of greens, lots of veggies. And then transitioning over to keto, I kept the meat, I kept the green veggies, and I just started adding in fats. For me, though, because I was so used to the leaner meats, I think I just gravitated more towards vegetable oils. So things like avocado oil and olive oil to supplement the fat in my diet.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds similar to my transition. It was almost like a free pass to just start drinking oil all of a sudden, but still doing it on like lean meat, right? Like avoiding some of those like really fatty cuts of meat.
Absolutely. Looking back, it's shocking to me.
Yeah, it is to me too. It's so crazy. It's cool that you mentioned Jimmy Moore. I mean, you appeared on his show. What did that mean to you? That must have been an honor.
That was an incredible experience to me. Kind of like you were saying with the low carb Denver, just being starstruck by these people who you've heard about or like consume their media or were very influential to your own story. I was starstruck. I was like, oh my gosh, this is someone who was such a big influence on the start of my own keto journey. And I don't know that I would have made it to carnivore without keto. So that's a big piece of the puzzle for me. Yeah, I was super honored to be on his show and honored to be, someone he calls friend and be able to rely on him if I need resources or I'm going through something. It's cool to be able to talk to him through that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I just sent an email like last week to Ben Bickman asking him a question, and he replies, and you're just like, "Whoa, cool."
That's awesome.
Yeah, so cool. So, okay, so you switch over to keto. You have a bunch of health conditions. What improved on a ketogenic diet, and what remained?
So on keto, I definitely noticed the joint pain was reduced. I noticed that I had less brain fog. I still had a lot of OCD behaviors. And in fact, some of my worst OCD behavior outbreaks were was during the time that I was doing keto. But I just noticed that things were better. It was easier for me to lose weight. I felt better at the gym. Reduced brain fog was a really great benefit. I really enjoyed that. And it was enough to keep me going for a while. But I don't know about you. I just found keto so black and white. Either you're on it or you're not. And anytime I went over my carb limit, I was like, well, I'm not going to need ketosis anyways. I might as well keep stuffing my face full of carbs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. It was difficult. It was difficult to know like exactly how much fat you should be using. And this person says you need at least 75%. And this person says, 150 grams or at least your body weight. And it can be very confusing to kind of navigate. I remember one of my clients, coming to me and saying like, well, I didn't hit the fat recommendation for the day, but I was already really full. So I just did like a 4-ounce shot of olive oil. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't think we're on the right track here. That doesn't seem like something we should be able to do.
Yeah. Side note, I see these like MCT oil challenges where people are just doing like shots of MCT oil. And I'm like, but why?
Disaster pants.
Yeah. It's like a glorified laxative. I don't understand it.
Wow, that's crazy. How funny. Well, it sounds like you and I both found out about the carnivore diet the same way. Can you tell the listener how you learned about the carnivore diet for the first time?
Yeah, it was actually through another coworker. They recommended the Joe Rogan podcast to me. And the first episode I turned on was Shawn Baker.
Wow.
I know I feel very, very lucky to have had that experience. It was just him doing his interview, talking about carnivore and how it was impacting his patients. And especially because he dealt with patients' joints, I think it really just spoke to me. I will say I sat on that information for a year or two before I actually acted on it. However, it stuck with me for the longest time.
Did you actually finish the episode?
I did. And I've re-listened to it since.
Oh, nice. I had to tell him on our show last year that I, to this day, have not finished listening to that episode because I think it was somewhere where he was saying like, I don't think blood work is really that great. And, feeling good today is probably the best indication that you're going to feel good tomorrow. And I was like, okay, I'm out. This is absolutely ridiculous. And to this day, I still haven't finished it. That's so funny. So what was it like to sit on it for kind of a year or two, kind of pondering it? Was it something you were diving into more content or just something you kept in the back of your mind?
It was definitely something I had in the back of my mind. I was struggling with ketos, kept falling off the wagon. Like I mentioned, I find it so binary, like either you're in ketosis or you're not. that it was really difficult for me to stay on track. So it always stuck with me as kind of like a easy way to start keto. Like that was my idea of carnivore, or how I thought it would be a part of my life. Is that I eventually decided I wanted to try a 30-day carnivore challenge to kickstart my keto diet again.
And was it deliberately in the world, carnivore month in January? Is that why you chose that? Or was it more like a New Year's resolution kind of thing?
It was definitely more of a New Year's resolution type of thing. I don't think I realized it was World Carnivore Month until like halfway through, and I started being involved in the Instagram community, and I was like, oh, cool.
That's awesome. So how did your 30-day experiment go?
It was life-changing. I'm now 623 days into my 30-day commitment to carnivore. I just found the differences between keto and carnivore so night and day for me. And I know not everyone might have this experience. Like some people can thrive on a keto diet, and I am super excited and happy for them because, there is more variety involved in that kind of diet. But carnivore changed my life. I say it cured my OCD. I no longer have obsessive compulsive thoughts. I no longer act on any obsessive compulsive thoughts. I no longer have joint pain. My pre-diabetes was reversed. I had chronic cystic acne my entire adulthood. It was one of those things where as a teenager, you're like, okay, acne is normal. And then as I got older and older, I was like, all right, when does it stop? And it wasn't until carnivore that I experienced clear skin for the first time in my life, which has been incredible. Wow. And just so many other benefits. So for me, it was night and day. Like keto gave me reduced joint pain and, reduced brain fog, but carnivore completely eliminated my OCD symptoms and my joint pain. And that was enough to keep me going. I will say it took 10 months for me to get the full benefit of carnivore. That's kind of when I found my baseline. But it was enough of a benefit in that first 30 days to keep me going.
Yeah. You said something really interesting that I really love. And maybe I haven't considered it in exactly the way that you said it, but it's almost like I'm with you. Like I'm really happy if somebody even starts paleo, because it's like, you're at least on the path. Like there is a certain progression. It seems like all of us have to go through where it's like standard American. Okay, this isn't working. What's out there? Okay, Whole Foods. Okay, paleo. Okay, let's try keto. And then it just seems like so many people just end up on a carnivore diet anyway. And I'm just so thrilled that look, you're on the path. You'll find it. It's going to take some time, but you'll be you'll be fine.
Absolutely. I mean, as someone who really, I feel like I tried a lot of things. I tried plant-based, I tried paleo, I did Whole30 at one point. It's just like, I think anyone who is willing to pursue their own health to that extent is eventually going to find the diet that works for them. And I'm totally cool if that's not carnivore for everyone. I just want more people to know it's an option for them.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so funny. You don't often see carnivores shouting at people, doing a vegan diet and saying they're ruining the world, or they're on the wrong diet. Like, it's like we talked about the community. Most of us are just over here like, yeah, we're just here to help. If you need help, we're around. It's not a big deal. It's so different.
It really is. It's night and day. Being a part of the plant-based community, a lot of people ask me carnivore is such a niche community. It feels very cult-like. And I'm like, you have no idea. Until you've been in a plant-based community, you don't know how different it is in the carnivore community, because it's not high pressure. It's not trying to compete with one another to be the absolute best, plant-based person in the space. Or I guess the difference is it's not virtue signaling. It really is truly just like everyone individually pursuing what works best for them and their health, and not necessarily putting that onto other people.
Totally. So we're not going to spend the rest of the episode arguing over who's the better carnivore.
Well, I mean, there's a clear answer there.
Exactly. So funny. Okay. So going back to when you first changed over, curious to know, what was one thing that was a lot easier than you thought it would be? And what was one thing that was a harder change, a more challenging thing that you had to adapt?
Definitely what I didn't realize would be so easy for me was cutting out vegetables. My entire childhood, I was always like the veggie eater in the family. And I truly believed that I enjoyed vegetables. Now I question that reality altogether. But I thought that was going to be a struggle for me, and I was going to miss vegetables. I was going to miss the texture. I was going to miss the taste. And I don't know, after the first week, I was like, I could be perfectly happy never eating broccoli again ever in my entire life. And now I don't intend to.
Mm. Yeah, me too. It's so funny. Like I would rather have like a whole bunch of, kind of bland carbohydrates, like a plate full of rice or something versus having vegetables. They just do not have nearly the same appeal that they used to. That's so funny. I want to talk a little bit about the competition that you did last summer. When did you start to think that you wanted to do a bikini competition?
It took me a while in my carnivore journey. The bikini competition itself was in the back of my mind for the past 5 years. I found bikini competitors on YouTube on a YouTube black hole at one point, and this was like 5 years ago. And I just fell in love with the sport. I was so inspired by the dedication and the hard work that these women went through for one moment on stage, but months and months of planning and prep behind it. And I'm not going to lie, I am kind of a girly girl. Getting on stage all glammed up seemed really thrilling to me. So it was always in the back of my mind, but I just knew with my OCD, I wasn't going to be able to compete healthfully for me and my experience. And so I started doing carnivore. I started feeling really great. The OCD was eliminated, and I was experiencing weight loss and finally building muscle at the gym, which I always found difficult before that. And so I was like, I can do this now. It was such a weird experience because it was like 10 months in and it just clicked for me. I was like, I'm ready to do a bikini competition. And it was just such an amazing feeling to be able to make that goal after having that dream for so many years.
That's amazing. What was your favorite part of it? Was it the journey of getting on the stage, or was it actually being on the stage?
Definitely the journey to the stage. It's, it's really easy to complain when you're waking up at 4 a.m. to go to the gym, but it's also such an amazing experience to wake up at 4 a.m. and go to the gym. Like I really framed it as I don't have to do this. I get to do this. I get to live out my dream every day. People ask me, how are you doing? And I would say, I'm living the dream. Like I get to wake up and work out and move towards this amazing goal that I've had for so long. And it was so life-giving to pursue that.
Wow. That's so cool. I think if I were to ask most health coaches, okay, I've got somebody here. They want to do a bikini competition. They have a history of an eating disorder, an OCD, and they eat only one certain kind of group of food. Most health coaches would be like, okay, absolutely not. This is a recipe for disaster. Tell me how were you able to kind of be really mindful about the process? It sounds like gratitude was a big part of that.
Absolutely. So I came to this realization when somebody came to me once I started training for my bikini competition. They sent me a message on Instagram and they said, I really want to like shape up and lose that last few pounds. So I'm thinking about doing a bikini competition. And it made me realize that the only time you should pursue a bodybuilding competition is when you're already happy in your body. You should absolutely not compete if you are trying to become something. One, because that body composition is for one day on stage. And I don't think it should be a long-term goal to have that body composition. But also, like, you're not going to continue to do the work. It comes down to intent. Like, are you doing it because you love yourself and this is a big dream you've had, like myself? Or are you doing this to punish yourself because you don't think you're good enough and you need to become something else?
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great way to approach it, and with totally different results than I see with other people who aren't as mindful of those things. And just to reiterate, I mean, you, my wife, definitely, Michelle Hearn, we've had on the show twice. Really amazing. These are all people that have had history of eating disorder and now are on, again, what looks like from the outside an extremely restrictive diet. Do you feel restricted by your foods at all?
No, it's such food freedom. Okay, even you saying that gave me tingles because I remember how obsessed I was with food when I was in the throes of my eating disorder. Like it was a constant thought. I was constantly worried about it. I was constantly worried about my body, like just all of the time. And now I don't think about food like that anymore. Like, yeah, I love food and I'm excited by food. And obviously I create these recipes. So it's a creative outlet for me as well. But it's not, it doesn't feel life or death for me anymore. I know that I can eat and nourish my body. And that is such a fulfilling experience. But I'm no longer eating or restricting to punish myself. It's to free myself. It's for my health.
I love that. You post a lot of different recipes. Does your diet have that much variety and like different ways of preparing things? Or do you find that the more time goes, the more simple your own meals become?
Definitely more simple. It's funny because someone asked me on a podcast once, they were like, do you feel like you're overcomplicating the carnivore diet for other people? And I was like, do you actually follow me on Instagram? Because if you follow my stories, I'm like, here's what I eat in a day. And it's like the same 3 foods every day. I do the recipes because it's a creative outlet for me. I find it fun. I find the challenge of it fun. I also find a lot of moms respond to it. They message me and they say thank you because they're trying to get their kids to eat more animal based. And it can be really difficult, especially for children who, whether it's at friends' houses or on TV, they see families eating a certain way. They can kind of keep their kids in that experience of having things like mac and cheese or pizza, but it is animal based. It is healthier for them than the standard American diet alternatives.
I love that. One of my favorite coaching things to give somebody is to tell them when you're looking for a recipe, put in whatever ingredient you want to cook. If it's chicken, fine. And then put in how you want to cook it. Like, do you want to smoke it? Do you want to put it in the air fryer or whatever? And then as soon as you search, go immediately to the images because it's so much easier to see a whole bunch of images and just visually look through and go, okay, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. I think I can make that. And then open the recipe to see it. And that's a cool thing about Instagram is it's set up the same way as you can just kind of scroll through and see. And yeah, you make it so visually appealing, but you're right. It can also be very helpful for somebody who's just starting to see like, okay, here's a few different ways to make eggs, but it's just eggs, or here's a few ways to do bacon, but it's just bacon. So I really appreciate that you do that. I think that's a great idea. When did coaching come into your frame of consciousness of something that you wanted to do?
It was really after I did an interview with Ribeye Love, the Confident Carnivore, and she was just so excited about my experience. She asked me if I was doing coaching, and I said no. And so she introduced me to some MeatRx coaches, or I guess Rivero now coaches.
Yeah, that's right.
And they just had such amazing things to say about how rewarding the experience of coaching is. And I spend a lot of time on Instagram answering DMs and stuff. And so I'm always happy to give back to the community in that way. But I always felt like really pressured for time and wanted to give people more of my time and direct attention. And so coaching seemed like a really natural progression for me. And oh my goodness, the Rivero coaches were right. It is so rewarding to see people who, they come to you with a goal of health or wellness, and then you're able to be a part of their journey to achieve that goal. It is incredibly rewarding.
That's amazing. Yeah, when I was unemployed during the pandemic, I signed up for Rivero coaching. It kind of kept me sane during the pandemic. And I don't make nearly as much doing that than I do my normal personal training, but I still haven't quit because it is so fun to work with people all over the world. I'm wondering what kinds of things would you tell to a beginner carnivore who is somebody that's working with you that you're just getting started with?
Yeah, I think a lot of us become hyper focused on the trends in the carnivore community, or at least, being such an active part of the Instagram community. I see these trends kind of come and go. But I think ultimately, especially for beginners, they should eat the meat they crave when they crave it. I think they're going to get the most bang for their buck that way rather than trying to tailor their diet to some trend. We all come to carnivore with different health histories, and we all come to carnivore with different goals. And so it doesn't make sense to think that someone else's diet is necessarily going to work for you because they're a different person. We're all very unique little snowflakes. And so there is no one perfect carnivore diet. There's just the perfect carnivore diet for the individual. And that can change over time too. But our bodies are amazing feedback systems. And if we listen to them, they'll tell us important information. For example, when I first started, I was craving a lot of salmon. And I think the big carnivore narrative is you need to eat a lot of beef. But I was craving a lot of salmon. So when I first started, I ate a ton of salmon, and I'm glad I did, because later when I got blood work done, I found that I was retaining a lot of iron. And so I think my body was trying to kind of pace my beef eating to catch up with my iron stores.
Eat the meat you want when you want it. Do you find that the simplicity is one of the things that people can't really wrap their minds around? That's a very simple statement, but you're right. That encompasses the entire carnivore diet in one phrase. Do you find it's hard for people to wrap their minds around how easy this can be?
Yes. And especially, coming from mainstream diet narratives, I think part of the problem is calling it a diet. So when we say carnivore diet, we mean carnivore way of eating. We don't mean diet in terms of like a structured, time restricted approach to weight loss. We mean like a nutrition plan for life. And so it's just getting out of that diet mindset where you think it has to be difficult in order to work. Even Atkins diet, I think, is a great example of what could be a really simple way of eating, low carb, high fat, and it's overcomplicated. Like, how many Atkins books are there, and how many versions of the original Atkins book is there? I think that as human beings, we have a tendency to overcomplicate things, and diet culture is one of the most unnecessarily complicated things out there. So to come to carnivore and be like, yeah, just eat meat, have salt, drink water, I think that's a really hard concept for people to grasp.
Yeah, I know. It's like with me personally, I eat once a day. I eat as much as I possibly can. I'm totally full and satiated. I can go off and do other things. I spend a few dollars a day on food. It's so amazing. It's such a cool way to eat and live. This came up in a coaching call I had even this week, actually. Sugar cravings. When somebody is trying this diet and they're coming, more from kind of like a standard American, or they've really struggled with, sugar cravings or sugar addiction in the past, what kinds of things do you tell that person to help get over the hump as far as the sugar cravings go?
Ooh, there's two approaches, and I kind of tailor it to the person. So everyone is a moderator or an abstainer, and you're a moderator or you're an abstainer in everything in life. Like, there are people who can moderate alcohol. There are people who absolutely cannot moderate alcohol and should abstain from it. But that is true for food and different types of food as well. So for the people who can moderate cheese, I like to recommend using cheese as a hack to get over sugar cravings. So anytime they have a sugar craving, have cheese instead. From my understanding, the proteins in cheese actually hit the same dopamine receptors as heroin. And so you're still giving your body that dopamine hit it wants from the sugar. However, you're doing it in an animal-based way. The easier way, I think, to get over sugar cravings is to go cold turkey and just kind of rough it out for the first couple of days. And over time, you just notice you have less cravings. But some people, it's just impossible for them to do that. And so I recommend the cheese hack. I definitely recommend a lot of salt for anyone starting a carnivore diet. So when you have increased levels of cortisol, it actually depletes your sodium in your body. And I think that just the process of switching over to a carnivore diet is stressful. It's socially stressful. It's physically stressful. So I think, salt intake is important regardless.
For somebody, you touched on something important there. For somebody who thinks or feels like it is stressful socially, that's a really tough one. How do you work with clients around that in particular?
Oh my goodness. Just get used to family members asking inappropriate questions about your poop. I can't tell you how many times I've been like at a party and a stranger is like finds out about the way that I eat, and they're like, so how do you poop? And I'm like, can we talk about yours next? Is that appropriate? No. So definitely like just get over that. But I think, a lot of people can't stomach the idea of animal-based for whatever reason, but they can stomach the thought of an elimination diet. So if you are going to like a family event where they may not be understanding, tell them you're doing an elimination diet. And then I think that can help kind of smooth over, like, why aren't you eating any vegetables? I think that can be a helpful approach. I think being the person that takes charcuterie or meat and cheese boards to any social event, like, you're going to be a favorite of the group anyway. And then, guaranteed you have something to eat. When I started carnivore, I was living in a non-carnivore home, and that was really, really difficult for me because I didn't have any support at home. And that's really why I turned to the Instagram community. And if you can get plugged into some online carnivore community, just because there aren't very many in-person carnivore communities because we're so spread out and we're still a pretty niche group. But becoming plugged into a community, I think, is super helpful. It helps keep you accountable. It helps, build the lifestyle around this way of eating instead of just making it a diet.
That leads me to my next question about the Meat Fan page on Facebook. Why did you decide to start that alongside what you do on Instagram?
I was looking for another way to connect with people. I think Instagram is really great, but it is kind of microscopic. It's one-on-one interactions, whereas in the Facebook group, we can kind of have it's simultaneously more intimate because it is a smaller group of people. We have about 120 members right now. And we can have weekly calls and we can check in with each other on a more intimate level, whereas Instagram can feel kind of overwhelming. And there really is no kind of like group platform on there where you can have that accountability with each other in that way.
I love that. I've noticed so much value in that, where the group just kind of helps coach each other and supports each other and find out that people are struggling with the same things, that they're not broken. Everything's totally normal. I love that. I think that's a really great approach. If you had like a big national platform that you could, scream to all of America, all of the world, whatever, who would you want to try a carnivore diet the most? Like, what group of people would you say, like, you guys, okay, you absolutely should try this?
I think, and I'll just talk a little bit about what inspires this. It would be me back in high school with the eating disorder, OCD, and vegetarianism. So I have a younger sister. She's about a decade younger than I am. And she deals with severe depression. And she has been institutionalized for eating disorders. And me being me and eating the way that I do, I just know how much being animal-based would help her and heal her brain. And it's so hard to watch someone so young go through so much. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so I think there's a lot of narrative in the, pop culture and media right now about anxiety disorders and how it's seeming to strike people at a younger and younger age. And so I would just tell those people, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you can choose not to live like this for the next 70 years of your life. It would be that group of people.
Gotcha. What a great and thoughtful answer. Had to ask you about stoicism. It sounds like stoic principles are something that you follow in your life. When did you come across stoicism as a way to add value to your life?
I had stumbled across it a few years ago, but it was really early 2020 that I really started taking those principles to heart. I think, like a lot of people, when the initial stuff with the pandemic was happening, everything just felt so out of control. And so I turned to stoicism as a way to find comfort in discomfort, essentially. I think stoicism teaches you to let go. And that's what I needed to do at the time, was just know that I don't have control of anything external. The only thing I control is my internal reaction to things. And so if that's the only thing I can control, I want to make sure I have as positive of a response as I possibly can, because ultimately I have to live with myself for the rest of my life. So I might as well be someone that I like to hang around.
I love that. Is that your favorite practice in stoicism, is the dichotomy of control, the things you can control and things you can't control? Are there other tools that it's helped give you as well?
I really appreciate stoicism as a whole. I appreciate it as, the way I think of it is like minimalism, like mindful minimalism. Like, what are you allowing into your life that is clutter, that is stressing you out? And what is actually adding value to your life, and really refining that down. To me, that's what stoicism is like, we spend so much time worrying about stuff that doesn't even matter. And what would it mean if we could focus our energy and our time on the things that really did matter, the things we really did care about?
I love the minimalist concept. I couldn't agree more. Like, this year, especially as we've been getting more into stoicism, we've been getting rid of stuff. And at first it's really tough. I gave away like 10 different, bike kits that were all hundreds of dollars. And you think that giving something away, you're going to miss that thing. But all it does is show you the 2 or 3 that you really love. And now you're just surrounded by all the things that you love and appreciate the most.
Absolutely. I moved cross country earlier this year, and I could only, I only took what would fit in my sedan. So it was really about refining down and realizing that I actually need a lot less than I thought I did to be happy.
This episode is sponsored by Marie Kondo. Spark Joy. Oh, Spark Joy. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate everything that you've gone through and your willingness to learn and grow and then also share your message. What is one simple tip that you would like the listener to walk away from this conversation with?
So this isn't actually my concept. It's something Linda, the Carnitarian.
Yeah.
I think she's been on. Yeah, I love her.
We've had her twice. She's great.
She was so influential in the beginning of my carnivore journey. And I remember listening to her on Carnivore Cast, and she said something that has stuck with me through all this time is like, eat the meat you like and can afford. And I'll just add one piece to that. Eat the meat you like, can afford, and makes you feel your best.
That's perfect. It's so simple and the benefits are so amazing. One of the pages on your story that we started this show talking about just showed like the really expanded list of everything that you improved in your life. And yeah, there were the major ones like the OCD, the acne, the joint pain, but I had to stop. I was out walking around. I had to stop because I couldn't read it all because the fine print was so small because there were so many things. And it's really quite remarkable that a certain way of eating can fix all those things. And we're so grateful for you and for your journey. Where would you like people to go to find you, connect with you, and work with you?
Absolutely. Lady Carnivory on Instagram. And if you're interested in joining the Meat Fam group on Facebook, it's just facebook.com/groups/meatfam.
Perfect. Very easy. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you again so much, Jacie, for everything that you've done and for being willing to share your message and be part of the community as a support. It's really awesome to see, and we're so grateful to have you with us and helping to change the narrative and everything you've accomplished. So thank you so much, and thank you for coming on to our show. It's been a real honor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate so much that you have a platform for people to share their stories and get the word out. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's been an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.